The King Alfred Plan, code name Rex 84. So we know that the Willie Lynch letter, which was a recent series completed here at Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit, 7 parts to it, with a 5-part reading of the letter in sections, and a post commentary, and then a biblical application to the letter. And so, with the understanding in both realms of the carnal and the spiritual, we know that the Willie Lynch letter is just what will be called a framework of global white supremacy, for lack of a better term. And the letter has probably its own name in the various countries where the same program was implemented. So, of course, we focused on the American soil so that we can begin to understand, as the descendants of slaves, those conquered and colonized, to understand the Willie Lynch letter, the reason for it, the institution of it. And then for this presentation, we will attach to it a fail-safe, an emergency, a backup plan, a insurance policy called the King Alfred Plan. So you can take the Willie Lynch letter, look at it as a framework of how the global empire was created, how it's maintained. Then you can now take this document and staple it right behind it, and call it, in the event the primary program fails, here is the solution. So we will begin. The King Alfred Plan, codename Rex 84, totally repugnant to the United States Republic Constitution for people under its protection. Introduction. The plan first appeared in a John A. Williams 1967 novel, The Man Who Cried, I Am, a fictionalized account of the life and death of Richard Wright. In the afterword to later editions, Williams compares the King Alfred Plan to intelligence programs devised by J. Edgar Hoover in the 1960s to monitor the movements of Black militants. It also bears similarities to rumors in the early 1950s surrounding the McCarran Act, an anti-communist law in which political subversives were to be rounded up and placed in concentration camps during a national emergency. When his novel was first published, Williams photocopied portions of the book detailing the King Alfred Plan and left copies in subway car seats around Manhattan, New York. As a result, word of the King Alfred Plan spread throughout the Black community, and the truth of his existence was often assumed to be unchallenged. Performer and musician Gil Scott-Heron created the song King Alfred Plan, included on his 1972 album Free Will, that takes the plan at face value. Jim Jones, head of the Apostolic Socialist People's Temple, discussed the plan at length in numerous recordings of his rant-style speeches, both in the USA and in the Jonestown community in Guyana, treating it as completely genuine. King Alfred Plan, codename Rex 84. King Alfred. In the event of continuing and coordinated racial disturbances in the United States. King Alfred, at the discretion of the president, is to be put into action immediately. Participating federal agencies: National Security Council, Department of Justice, Central Intelligence Agency, Department of Defense, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Interior. Participating state agencies under federal jurisdiction: National Guard units and state police. Participating local agencies under federal jurisdiction: the city police. A memo to the National Security Council. Even before 1954, when the Supreme Court of the United States of America declared unconstitutional separate educational and recreational facilities, racial unrest and discord had become very nearly a part of the American way of life. But that way of life was repugnant to most Americans. Since 1954, however, that unrest and discord have broken out into widespread violence, which increasingly have placed the peace and stability of the nation in dire jeopardy. This violence has resulted in loss of life, limb, and property, and has cost taxpayers of the nation billions of dollars. And the end is not yet in sight. This same violence has raised the tremendously grave question as to whether the races can ever live in peace with each other. Each passing month has brought new intelligence that, despite new laws passed to alleviate the condition of the minority still is not satisfied. Demonstrations and rioting have become a part of the familiar scene. Troops have been called out in city after city across the land, and our image as a world leader severely damaged. Our enemies press closer, seeking the advantage, possibly at a time during one of these outbreaks of violence. The minority has adopted an almost military posture to gain its objective, which are not clear to most Americans. Okay, so I'm going to interject there. So the minority has adopted an almost military posture to gain its objectives, which are not clear to most Americans. And the only simple response that I could submit is most Americans, quote unquote, historically would not identify with the mentality of the quote unquote minority or blacks or Negroes. Our conditions in this country are not equivalent. All other nations came here as a choice to participate on the platform of the American dream. And the minority, Negro, blacks, those indigenous and native to this land, conquer, colonize, and enslave. Those who came here to participate will not understand those who came here in bondage and were destroyed off of their heritage. So, which is not clear to most Americans. Okay, continuing. It is expected, therefore, that when those objectives are denied the minority, a racial war must be considered inevitable. When the emergency comes, the racial war, we must expect the total involvement of all 22 million members of the minority, men, women, and children. For once this project is launched, its goal is to terminate once and for all the minority threat to the whole of the American society and indeed the free world. So this document was created sometime, let's say mid-50s, 60s, 70s. So we're going to have to augment some of these numbers and some of the organizations in the preceding sentences. So there's definitely more than 22 million quote unquote minority, which means Black Negroes in America. And we need to understand that in the event of a national emergency of racial violence, the goal of this memo is to terminate once and for all the minority threat to the whole of the American society and indeed the free world. That is the mind frame for the quote unquote minority to maintain throughout this reading. Signed by the chairman of the National Security Council. Preliminary memo of the Department of Interior. Under King Alfred, the nation has been divided into 10 regions. In case of emergency, minority members will be evacuated from the cities by federalized National Guard units, local and state police, and, if necessary, by units of the regular armed forces using public and military transportation and detained in nearby military installations until a further course of action has been decided. Capital Region 1, Northeast Region 2, Southeast Region 3, Great Lakes Region 4, South Central Region 5, Deep South Region 6, Deep South Region 2, 7, Great Plains, Rocky Mountain Region 8, Southwest Region 9, West Coast Region 10. No attempt will be made to seal off the Canadian and Mexican borders. From the Secretary of the Department of Interior. 849-899. King of England, who slaughtered thousands under the disguise of protecting the European religion of Christianity. As a result, he was revered as one of the most notable kings in the history of England. Combined memo, Department of Justice, with the preliminary memo, Federal Bureau of Investigation and Central Intelligence Agency. There are 12 major minority organizations, and all are familiar to the 22 million. Dossiers have been compiled on the leaders of these organizations and can be studied in Washington. The material contained in many of the dossiers and our threat to reveal that material has considerably held in check some of the leaders. Leaders who do not have such usable material in their dossiers have been approached to take government posts, mostly as ambassadors and primarily in African countries. The promise of these positions also has materially contributed to the temporary slowdown of minority activities. However, we do not expect these slowdowns to be of long duration because there's always new and dissonant elements joining these organizations with the potential power to replace the old leaders. All organizations and their leaders are under constant 24-hour surveillance. These organizations are the Black Muslims, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, Congress of Racial Equality, Uhuru Movement, Group on Advanced Leadership, GOAL, Freedom Now Party, FNP, United Black Nationalists of America, UBNA, the New Pan-African Movement, TNPAM, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, the National Urban League, NUL, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, Committee on Racial and Religious Progress, CORARP, and as an amendment currently as of 2018, the Hebrew Israelite Nation Movement Group organizations have been attached to these organizations that are constantly being monitored. Note, at the appropriate time to be designated by the president, the leaders of some of these organizations are to be detained only when it is clear that they cannot prevent the emergency, working with local public officials during the first critical hours. All other leaders are to be detained at once. Compiled lists of minority leaders have been readied at the National Data Computer Center. It is necessary to use the minority leaders designated by the president in much the same manner in which we use the minority members who are agents with the central and federal, and we cannot, until there is no alternative, reveal King Alfred in all its aspects. Minority members of Congress will be unseated at once. This move is not without precedent in American history. Wow. So, National Racial Emergency Crisis, the outlying organizations that are under constant 24-hour surveillance will be detained. The leaders who are not in cooperation with the government and cannot prevent the emergency, they will have a small moment to try to administer a diplomacy, per se. All other leaders will be detained at once, and the members, Black Negro members of Congress, will be unseated. So, reading that right there lets you know the Black minority Negro members of Congress have no power at all. And that was signed by the Attorney General. Preliminary memo, Department of Defense. This memo is being submitted in lieu of a full report from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is the heads of all of the military services of the country. That report is now in preparation. There will be many cities where the minority will be able to put into the street a superior number of people with a desperate and dangerous will. He will be a formidable enemy, for he is bound to the continent by heritage and knows that political asylum will not be available to him in other countries. The greatest concentration of the minority is in the Deep South, the Eastern Seaboard, the Great Lakes region, and the West Coast. While the national population exceeds that of the minority by more than 10 times, we must realistically take into account the following. 1, an estimated 40 to 50% of the white population will not, for various reasons, engage the minority during an emergency. 2, American armed forces are spread around the world. A breakout of war abroad means fewer troops at home to handle the emergency. 3, local law enforcement officials must contain the emergency until help arrives, though it may mean fighting a superior force. New York City, for example, has 25,000 man police force, but there are about 1 million minority members of the city. We are confident that the minority would hold any city for only a few hours. The lack of weapons, facilities, logistics, all put the minority at a final disadvantage. Since the Korean War, this department has shifted minority members of the armed forces to areas where combat is most likely to occur, with the aim of eliminating through combat as many combat-trained military servicemen as possible. Today, the ratio of minority member combat deaths in Vietnam, where they are serving as advisors, is twice as high as a minority population ratio to the rest of America. Another interjection. So, all the brothers and sisters out there who are enlisting or already serving in the military forces, since the Korean War, it has been U.S. government policy to ensure that you get to the most likely combat areas so you can be eliminated through combat. And you won't be able or have the impression or the mindset or the initiation to come back to your own communities and teach your people any of those tactics, techniques, policies, provisions, etc. So when you enlist, it is the policy of the government to send you to a combat area with the aim of eliminating you. Okay. Continuing. Below is the timetable for King Alfred, as tentatively suggested by the JCS, who recommended that the operation be made over a period of 8 hours. 1, local police and military leaders in action to head off the emergency first hour. 2, the countdown to 8 hours begins at the moment the president determines the emergency to be national, coordinated, of long duration. 3, county police join local police at the 7th hour. 4, state police join the county and local police at the 6th hour. 5, Federal marshals join state, county, and local forces, 5th hour. 6. National Guards federalized, held in readiness at the 4th hour. 7. Regular armed forces alerted, take up positions. Minority troops divided and detained, along with all white sympathizers under guard, 3rd hour. All minority leaders, national and local, detained at the 2nd hour. 9. President addresses minority on radio and television, gives it 1 hour to end the emergency, in the 1st hour. 10. All units under regional command into emergency at the 0 hour. The committee report. Survey shows during a 6-year period, production created 9 million objects, or 1.5 million each year. Production cannot dispose of the containers, which proved a bottleneck. That was almost 20 years ago. We suggest that vaporization techniques be employed to overcome the production problems inherent in King Alfred. The committee report is referring to the problems that occurred in Nazi Germany when the furnaces were not hot enough to burn the bodies that Hitler had killed. The bodies clogged up the furnaces, thereby causing a problem that the above committee recommends avoiding by building high-volume, nuclear-powered incinerators to burn 5,000 degrees. It should be noted that steel melts at approximately 2,700 degrees. So, my minority, Black, Negro, colored, people of color, Afro-American, African-American, niggas. In whatever capacity you are, from not having a job to being a Black CEO or a Black billionaire, in the event of a national racial emergency, your political leaders will be unseated and detained. You will be put into military installations, and the final solution is to send you to high-powered nuclear incinerators to burn you away as a solution to the American problem and of the free world. So, the King Alfred 84 plan is the insurance policy in case the Willie Lynch syndrome breaks down. So, for all of us who have come back to the truth and the light of our identity as Israelites, we are a target of this agenda. And as we grow in our understanding and withdraw ourselves from spiritual Egypt and Sodom and Babylon, this agenda becomes more and more in effect. I submit to you my love. I petition you to take care to continue to grow in the light, in the love, and the law of the Holy Creator of the heavens and the earth in all humanity. This is Revelations.Unveiled Detroit, bringing you an attachment to the Willie Lynch letter.